Welcome to the Construction Marketers Podcast, where we teach you how to create the best content in construction. I'm your host, Jonathan Core, and today we're chatting with Andrew Brown. Andrew is the CEO of ToolFetch, a LinkedIn influencer of the trades, and a founding member of the Skilled Trades Advisory Council. Welcome to the pod, Andrew.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Ready to get right into it.
Yeah, for sure. Just for more context for those who are listening, I've been following Andrew for a few years now. He posts incredible content, specifically short form video content, advocating for the trades, and obviously trying to address a lot of the problems that we're facing in the industry as it relates to the labor shortage, preconceived notions about the industry, and kind of the disservice, in a sense, for lack of better words, that maybe society has placed on joining the trades and blue collar, type work. I know that you'd mentioned like mechanics, plumbers, electricians. There's a lot of specific skilled trades. But before we begin kind of unpacking more of what you're doing, what you're advocating for, and more of the mechanics around your content creation, I had heard on different podcasts and different interviews that you'd been on that you are a former IT guy. That was your, and also too, I saw in your LinkedIn, you were a finance major. And so my question is, how does a finance major, former IT guy land in the world of construction?
9/11. So September 11th, 2001, I was living in New York City at the time, 23 years old. And the planes had just hit the World Trade Center. And I remember this vividly because it was such an impactful day. And I got a crazy idea that I'm going to go down there and I'm going to help. And I convinced a friend in Rhode Island at the time. And I said to him, look, we got to go down there. We got to do something. I feel like we need to do something. He thought, like, we're not going down there. And I said, yeah, we're going to go down there. After some convincing back and forth, a couple of days later, he shows up in New York City at my doorstep in a big blue truck with an American flag on the back. And he's dressed up as a tradesperson. And he's got a hard hat. He's got overalls for me. And I find myself now racing down the West Side Highway from checkpoint to checkpoint. And we make it all the way down to the World Trade Center. And I always say the reason I got through those checkpoints was divine intervention. Like something was kind of pulling me down there. We parked the car. And now I'm standing on the World Trade Center where it once stood. And the entire day, I was helping first responders, EMS, firefighters, and tradespeople find survivors. And you talk about life-changing events, not only personally, but professionally. As you said, I was a high-tech guy. I'm to some degree, a tech nerd. I was working on computers and doing some programming and that type of stuff. And I was kind of thrust into this situation. And I was working elbow to elbow with tradespeople. And I was like, oh, my God, look what they do. And they're putting themselves in harm's way, and they were running into unstable structures and glasses falling. It was such an unbelievable situation that I was in, but I was just in awe what they did for finding survivors, that I had a good IT job in New York City. And after that incident, I literally put my 2 weeks notice in.
Wow.
And I just kept saying to myself, how do I give back to the tradespeople? What can I do to give back? And that's when I formed my tool and equipment business, online business called ToolFetch with my brother, as you mentioned, about 22, 23 years ago, where we provide tools, equipment, safety products to the skilled trades, your welders, your carpenters, your plumbers, and other blue-collar skilled trades. And these are the men and women who are building and rebuilding our infrastructure. And we reach them by offering over about 2 million products from 650 different vendors. So products like lifts, cement mixers, drain cleaners, and products like that. That's my way to get back to the skilled trades. But it's almost like I was pulled down there and said, like, you're not an IT guy. Like, you need to get back to the skilled trades. And that's kind of how I got, I don't want to say pushed, but I just was, God sent me a message. I don't know how to describe it, but I've been doing it for 22, 23 years, advocating for the trades. And one day, about a year and a half ago, turned on the camera and have not turned the camera off since, just advocating for the trades.
So
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So this isn't the first time I've heard Andrew's story, but the reason I wanted to ask it is one, I think it's a profound story, profound experience, especially for you to be there and experience what that was like on 9/11. Obviously, it was a huge traumatic situation that obviously shocked the entire United States and honestly the world. But I say this because you know, I'm sure other people probably, whether it was IT background, finance, like people were probably, jumping in to help, but not everybody had maybe the same conviction to be able to actually go out and say, hey, these guys are incredibly essential, important to what our everyday life, but obviously, especially too in these kind of traumatic situations. But in my opinion, one, you've taken the step obviously in building Toolfetch now, but like you mentioned, about a year and a half ago, you turned on the screen, and I think that's the piece that's the most compelling to me because it's one to go through the experience that you had gone through on 9/11, but then two, it's now to actually find ways to bring awareness and shed a new light on the trades. And so, I'm interested what specifically happened a year and a half ago for you to turn on the camera in order for you to actually start, outside of Toolfetch to begin, creating content that advocates for the trades.
I was going down. So I had made content prior to that, and it was mostly business objective. It was mostly how to's, how to use a magnetic drill, or how to, Milwaukee versus DeWalt. That those type of videos, and I was never sort of satisfied in making that type of content. It's for certain people. I was doing it um, mainly for the site and SEO traffic and a lot of different things. But I, the essence of always being in front of the camera, I always enjoyed. I just it wasn't exactly the content that I wanted to make, and I I talk to welders and carpenters and plumbers all day long for 22 years. So I've had all this in my head for years, and naturally I'm an introvert, not an extrovert. And I was just like, one day I said, look, I want to start advocating for the trades. Like, go back to my roots, go back to 9/11, go back to what I saw there. And I just turned on the camera, and it was like a few videos in. And I made a video, and I said, welding is a dying career. And I started listing all the statistics behind it. And it was one of those videos where you always see other people go viral. Like, this one viral. This one, like,
Oh.
insanely viral. And after I got off the vanity metrics and what I saw, and I was just like, wow, there's a lot of people who are in the skilled trades that are on LinkedIn. And it resonated very well. And I just started creating different types of content based upon advocating for the trades, the shortage of the trades, what can we do to get more people in the trades? And it just evolved, I guess, over the last year or so, that I would just literally get up and just start talking. And the feedback, the engagement, I knew it was working with the people I was targeting, people in the trades. And I just kept getting feedback and from comments and listening to other people's stories. So I would start to highlight success in the trades, people who have success stories, that type of stuff. And I kept going down, obviously, a lot of different paths, a lot of different roads. But that's what keeps me going, is to know that I feel like I'm making an impact in the trades. I feel like I'm making an impact for the advocacy of the trades. And I feel like I'm making an impact for the next generation. And through our foundation, Stack the Skilled Trades Advisory Council, our goal is to get the next generation involved. So I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So to me, to get up in front of the camera and start talking, I love it, in a sense, because of the mission and passion behind the trades advocacy.
Yeah, that's incredibly insightful and interesting, especially too just knowing that you kind of said two things that I feel like kind of bump heads, and it's not to say it's wrong. It's to say, you say, in one hand, I'm an introvert, but on the other hand, I like being in front of a camera. And it's interesting to understand that because, for myself, for example, I'm also very introverted. But I'm realizing more and more as I do public speaking type things and then, podcasting. I actually do like creating content. I do like building community, and it's not so much because I like to see or hear my own voice, but it's just like I like interacting and talking about topics that are incredibly interesting and engaging. So, but for me, the thing I want to ask next is, I know that creating content takes a lot of time. Like, it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, especially too when you add in video and scripting and editing, and then creating the actual captions, all that sort of stuff. Scheduling, having it all laid out. So I'm just curious. You're a CEO of Toolfetch. You have a lot of, I'm sure you have a family, you have a whole bunch of other things that you're navigating. Why create, like, or maybe not why, because now you already listed off why, but how are you going about creating time and margin for this, knowing that you have a business, knowing that you have family, knowing that you have other commitments? How is a busy CEO like yourself doing this?
I want to take you back a little bit when I was making other content for my business, and I was focusing on YouTube at the time. And I had a separate uh, area where I filmed in my house all the content. And I remember it was like a Wednesday, and I was like, "Damn, today's Wednesday. I need to go do a video. Let me go run downstairs and let me go put something together, a how-to of how to buy this particular product, or how to build something, or I was doing different types of content back then. And I remember doing the content, shooting the content, then editing myself, and then figuring out what the thumbnail was going to be, then think about the title and the description, everything, and then I put it up, and then bomb. And I was like, what am I doing? Why am I wasting my time here? Like, I'm not, like you said, I have things that I do, obviously, from a CEO perspective, and speaking with direct reports and meetings and stuff. I'm like, took me a lot of time, and I said to myself, this. I literally burnt out. I just I burnt out, and I was like,
Mm.
I can't do this. And it wasn't until I actually started working with Alex Sheridan, and we put together a content strategy behind time, I guess more time management, right? How, as a busy CEO, can you make content? Well, first you need to commit to it, and you need to be dedicated to it. You can't just be like, well, I'm going to do it one week and maybe I'll do it 3 weeks later. You need to be consistent. So I got into a regular pattern of doing content every Wednesday. So I would set aside Wednesday and I'd block out my calendar, and I would say, for an hour or so, or an hour here, I am going to do video. And I would pick and choose my locations. I knew exactly what I was more or less going to talk about topic wise, and I would shoot 5 or 6 videos, short videos. So in that hour period, I'd have 5 or 6 videos, and I got smart. I obviously hired an editor at that point, because I'm not an editor. I don't choose. It's not what I like to do. I like to be in front of the camera. I don't like to do the editing portion. So I hired an editor to do the work, and it was farmed out. And it made it easier for me, because a lot of the editing that was coming back, there was no revisions. It was good for it hit the mark, and then I would just post it, and then I'd get to the place where, wait a second, I'm scheduling everything, and I got to put the post together, and then so I started delegating some of that stuff to other people. So really, realistically, at the end of the day, yes, from it, everybody's busy. Me as a CEO, or what you do, or what the next person does, it's about putting together a plan and delegating the stuff that you don't like to do. Because if you're doing the editing, if you're doing all the content generation, if you're doing all the posting, it's very hard to do that and your full-time job. So you need to figure out, and it obviously comes down to budget as well, because you have to pick and choose. Look, you have editors who are at this level, and there's editors at this level. You got to pick and choose what you want. And then you have to figure out, from a standpoint from posting, do you want to delegate that, or do you still want to handle that? So you got to decide what you want to do in your budget. But once you start planning that out, then it doesn't feel like you're doing content all the time. So you batch record it all together. I mean, the biggest content creators out there, Alex Hormozy and Gary Vee, and a lot of others out there, a lot of them are batch recording everything, or they're pulling content from a podcast and taking 10 clips from that. So you're always ahead. I always found before I was never ahead. So I couldn't get ahead, and I always felt like I was doing content this way. That content strategy works, at least for me, and I'm constantly able to put out content day in and day out, knowing that I'm a month ahead or 2 months ahead. Because without that, then I go back to my days of like shooting YouTube videos and just be like, oh my God, like we've all been there. So it's all about a content strategy and figuring out how much time you can allot to it. And it shouldn't be a lot. Unless you're a full-time content creator, that's something else.
So let me ask this question then, because I definitely have a more extended response to what you just said. Are you telling me for the content you're producing, you're allocating at least an average of an hour or so a week for it?
Shooting video, yeah.
What other elements are you scripting as well? What is the kind of collect? If you were to look at like the time allocation, that from your time, not the editor, all this sort of stuff, but your time, what would that be per week? You think?
As the week goes on, and this goes for any content creator, is to pick and choose the topics you want to talk about. And that could just be from the comments that you have, that you're reading the comments, and then all of a sudden there's a topic, and that it could turn it into a whole video. Chat GGP, I mean, a lot of people utilize for content creation. It's just, it gets the juices flowing. It only gets you to a certain degree, maybe gets you to like 60%, but you still have to think about it. It might not be the right generating ideas that come out of ChatGPT. So you got to be careful. What you put in is what you get out, because if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. I think a combination of that, but also just what's trending out there. Mm-hmm. So if there's an article and it's talking about the shortage of plumbers, that we need 550,000 plumbers, that is trending right now. Well, that could be making to a good video or a text post of some sort. So I'm always watching sort of the trends, just topics that are coming out of the comments. And then some of the stuff, look, there's only how many different ways can you talk about the trade shortage? Sometimes it gets redundant and it has to be done in different ways. So it all sort of depends, but it has to be done in a way where it's not stagnant. So your audience doesn't feel like, oh, there he goes again. He's talking about the trades. Like, try to change it up a little bit, because there's only so many different ways you can talk about a topic.
Man, everything you're saying right now is gold, Andrew. I know I'm talking to a content creator when you list off all those, but like, hey, looking in the comments for ideas. You'd mentioned like trying to keep things fresh and not going stale and not being super templatized, because I'm sure we've all seen content where like, oh, you know exactly what they're going to talk about, and over time that starts to lose some of its sizzle. So I can definitely tell that there's a lot there, a lot of knowledge that you have, which for me, I'm like, this is a CEO of a tool and equipment company, CEO, speaking as though he's a full-time content creator, which in my perspective from afar, from LinkedIn, that's what it seems. But the thing I wanted to respond to earlier is, it's crazy that maybe it is hour or two of your time to be able to create and put out the amount of content that you put out is absolutely nuts to me. And it's honestly super convicting, because I'm running into this right now. I'm burnt out. Like I got burnt out maybe about the past month, and because I have so many ideas. I have so many different things I could be doing, all that sort of stuff. And I'm just like, I'm probably the problem to a lot of the problems that I'm creating, or I'm the issue to a lot of the problems I'm creating. And so I'm actually at that position now where I'm like, okay, how do I begin delegating some of these things out? Because the reality is like, it's kind of a catch-22, because one, I know I need it to be able to create more margin in my life, to be able to create, do higher level activities. But then the other thing though, is I actually like creating the content. I actually like the editing. And so trying to rip me away from that is really tough, and something that I'm having to go through. But I think I think it's super encouraging that you mentioned, how many hours you're allocating to be able to do this, and how you're, trying to find ways to outsource this and do all that sort of stuff. I think is incredibly smart, because the impact that you've had, at least from what I've seen on LinkedIn, is immensely great, and it continues to grow. And it's interesting because I think I looked at it. I know within the last day or so. I know that you're now, probably getting close to reaching maybe 10,000 followers on LinkedIn specifically. But I feel like I remember maybe a year ago it wasn't that much. It might have been 5, 6, or 7,000. But considering the amount of engagement you're getting, it's super surprising. So the thing I'll kind of want to unpack a little bit more, because you already mentioned you'd been burnt out in the past on YouTube, creating content for YouTube. In my opinion, I feel like some of the early content pieces and types that we create are formative in our journey to be able to do what we're doing now. Like who Andrew Brown is today is not the same Andrew Brown he was years ago, but I would say that the early Andrew Brown content creator helped Andrew Brown now to be able to, figure out the mechanics, figure out what works, all this sort of stuff. So I'm just curious, like, what were some of those experiences or lessons that you learned early on that helped you now, maybe the past year and a half, to be able to, hit the ground running and not starting from, zero?
I always, and this might not fully answer the question. I always enjoyed being in front of the camera. Some people, and a lot of people make content on trying to get people to get in front of the camera. I never had that problem. That's a big piece right there. Talking to an empty camera, it doesn't bother me. Some people are like, I'm talking to a camera. To me, it doesn't matter. I could talk to the camera. So that's the first piece. You gotta, you gotta be comfortable doing that. So for me, that I always did that. What else did I really pick up? I'm trying to think what else in the really early stages. I always knew that video was going to be the wave of the future, even obviously years prior. I mean, we started our channel in 2010,
Mhm.
2009. It was really early on, and I always knew that video was going to be the future. And people see your face, people can see if it's authentic compared to doing sort of text posts. I feel like, especially on LinkedIn, when there's what is it, almost a billion users at this
Mhm.
point. I think at this point, where there's only 1 to 2% of content creators, and out of that 1 to 2%, how many are making videos?
Mm.
I had people who reach out to me all the time, and I get on a call with them. It's like, I know you already. Like, I know you. You can't do that with text posts. You can only go so far with a text post. That's why I feel that video content is so powerful today, and it's the wave of the future. So I feel like I'm already ahead of the game because I've been doing this for a while, and I had to put the reps in
Yep.
because originally I just sucked. you know, you look at those first few videos, you're like, what was I even thinking? What was I wearing? What was I doing? The lighting was messed up. And then you just get better and you just keep testing and trying. Because I looked at people too and I said, well, how am I going to get there? I don't get it. How are they
Mm.
doing that? And then you start implementing all these, start learning these little tricks, you start testing. And the one thing is, you never give up. What I do see quite often here, and especially on LinkedIn, it's all of a sudden there's people posting content and videos, and then they disappear. I'm like, where'd they go? What happened to them? They were doing it consistently. It's like something happened, and they can't do content anymore. That's not. It's a long game. It's not a short game. You got to keep going with it. And if you really pick apart a lot of people on LinkedIn, there's only a handful of people who are really consistent and stay doing it. So I made a commitment to myself that advocacy for the trades requires me to show up every day. And when I don't show up, I feel like I'm doing an injustice. So
Mm.
that's just me. It's just I'm driven and I make time for it.
So
I don't know
this
if I
is
answered the question fully. I know
yeah.
I went around about, but
No,
that's just
that's good. I think there's a lot of nuggets in that, and I'm curious because you mentioned people get to know you more when they see your face, to see what you're like, and communicate all that sort of stuff. Um, I'm curious. This is just me kind of nerding out about this because I don't get to do that a lot with other creators on LinkedIn. But so I recently started dabbling with video, and I'm creating a lot of video content from these podcasts, as well as I started a YouTube channel. So I created a lot of talking head videos, things like that, to be able to educate people in construction how to create better, more content consistently, things like that. One of the things I've noticed with video content, and this is actually an observation I made from a marketer in the B2B space. His name is Chris Walker. He's huge on demand generation, things like that. That's kind of his niche or his area that he owns. And for the longest time, he got on my radar in 2020, and I noticed a lot of his content was written content, and it was incredible. Like it went absolutely, 5, 6, 7, 1,000 likes, per post, things like it was popping off, especially during the pandemic. Everybody's home, things like that. But eventually, he launched a podcast and he started using a lot of the clips and have that feed into what the copy, things like that were. But one of the observations he had made, and I listened to one of his podcasts maybe a few years ago, he had mentioned that the reach for video content is actually less than the reach of a text post. And so I'm curious, in your position, knowing that a majority of your content strategy is video, have you seen or experienced that? Or I'm just curious what your thoughts are on there. Because the thing I noticed, because he said, hey, but the reason he's actually doing video, and the reason he doesn't mind the meaning, maybe the engagement being less, maybe it's 10, 15, 20% less engagement. But the reason he's doing it is kind of back to what you said. You build more trust. When somebody sees you, hears you communicate, it's like, hey, this guy, because it's easy to kind of BS behind words and text and all sorts of stuff. You'd be able to have it polished. It's way more difficult to do that when you're, speaking on a mic, speaking in front of a camera, things like that. But so I'm curious on that kind of specific thing. Have you noticed that, like, in your experience?
In LinkedIn specifically, or
Yeah,
just
LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn? It's funny. I'll give you an example today. I did a text post today, and it was in reference to I was in Las Vegas, and I went to the Sphere, which is that new uh, uh, where they have concerts
Yep.
and video, and I was making a point that the skilled trades built it. Well, it didn't get many likes, right? It just fell flat. Now, do I get upset over that and say, "Oh my God, that's"? I mean, look, I do so much content. There's things that are going to go that are going to bomb, and there are things that are going to work. I learned from it. As far as sort of the reach, I think it just goes up and down. I think it's just ebbs and flows, and you're unless you have a true audience and followers, it's kind of hard. It's all based upon the algorithm where you get pushed. I mean, you can have the best video, but if you don't hook somebody in the first 1, 2, 3 seconds, they're out.
Mhm.
And that was one of the things that I always focused on, was trying to grab attention, because everyone's attention is in 5 different places. And why are they going to listen to me for 30 seconds? So it has to be extremely engaging. But I think LinkedIn just ebbs and flows. Some people will say text posts, but then again, I look at it and say, well, do I know, is the content creator creating it, or is it a ghostwriter, or is it they just using some form of AI to generate this stuff, which now it's so straightforward and easy just to
Yeah.
feed it through ChatGPT or some type of AI tool. But you can't do that with video, at least not yet. Obviously, you're getting to the point where everything, the fakes, and is it the real person? I think even Alex Sheridan did a video of himself, and it was just an AI version of it. And it was like, whoa. So, I mean, that's not too far off down the road.
Yeah.
But I do feel that the video side is the most impactful, but it may not get the most views or likes. But what I'll tell you this, and what I've found is, it's not the people who are liking and engaging; it's the people that you don't know behind the scenes that are talking about you. And
Mm.
I've had people reach out to me who I never saw a like, I never saw a comment. I'm like, oh my God, it's a pretty important person. And they're reaching out to me, but they did see it, they did consume it. So there's a lot of that. So even though that it's viewership maybe has gone down a little bit, I just think it ebbs and flows. But you never know who's who's viewing your content sort of and not commenting or not liking it. I don't base it off of that. I just every video I do, I know makes a little bit of impact. Some make a bigger impact, but I feel that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I don't agonize over 1 or 2 posts that fail. I just get up and I do it the next day.
Yeah, and I love hearing that from a practitioner, somebody who's out there doing it, because I have those posts too. So like, and also too, I'm sure that you probably have the experience where like, Oh, like, because eventually you start to kind of figure out the recipe of a potentially viral post and what it takes and the qualities and characteristics for it. But the
Yeah.
crazy part though is when you experiment and you're like, I feel like this has potential, and then it flops. And then vice versa. You're like, like I'm excited about this, but I don't know if it'll do that well. And then it takes off. So it's really tough to say what actually works at the end of the day when it comes to creating content. Um, One of the things I wanted to ask, and this is an observation I've made from your content. I think it might have been maybe a year ago or so. Um, and I heard this come up again. There's this marketer. His name is Neil Patel. He's
Yeah.
an SEO, yeah, marketing
Mhm.
guy, and
Yep.
he's been creating a
Sure.
lot of short form video content. And he basically was talking about he was kind of sharing his strategy for coming up with ideas, testing things out, and then eventually distributing them. And his whole content strategy, it was absolutely fascinating. But one of the things he said specifically for LinkedIn is he'd noticed because he has a whole team and they try the A/B test. He said text posts work the best on LinkedIn, but video posts obviously are able to expedite the process for building trust at scale. He said that the recipe that he figured out was leveraging the captions or all the copy from the video and then using that as your text for the post. And the reason I say this is I noticed that with your content. I don't remember when it finally stuck out, but I'm like, oh, this is very similar to the text post that you're using, but you're doing it in the video. And so I religiously, I would just go in and play your video and then go back up to the text. I'm like, okay, obviously you'll tweak things and stuff like that to be able to format it. But I'm curious, how did that how did that thought or idea come about? Because I know that you'd been doing it for longer than I'd seen anybody else doing it, even other marketers I follow within the industry. But how did you land on that specific idea?
I just think the things that I'm talking about in the video, obviously. Well, let me put it to you this way: most people don't have the sound on,
Hmm.
or they're not looking at the video. A lot of people, there's a good portion of people that just want to read. There are times that I just don't want to look at the video; I want to read. So what I'm saying in the video could more or less kind of match what I'm saying in the text post. I look at it as some people like to read versus some people like to listen and hear it. Some people just want to watch it, but on mute. It really depends. Everyone's a little bit different. But I find myself too reading a post versus sometimes actually looking at the video. I don't. It wasn't a plan or anything in that, but it's useful in a sense that it's just capturing what I'm saying, and if somebody wants to read it, that's really, I guess, the reason why I put it in like that, because I would figure that some people are just not hearing it because it's on mute.
And that's smart because I would say there's three ways that people engage with it. Obviously, one would be listening and watching the video. That's one.
Mhm.
Two is and I know that you do a really good job of this, is adding the captions on the video. That way, people who are looking at the video just reading the captions of what you're saying. But then the three is the captions above, which are actually leading into the post. So I think you honestly, in my opinion, you diversify the ability for your audience to consume your content, which allows for more engagement and things like that. I'm curious to see, just to get into nerd out a little bit more into the mechanics of you creating content. What have you figured? Like, is there a formula or like specific topics or things that you notice that hey, if you post about this, you know that this thing might be able to blow up or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, if you're going to talk about, if you want specifics, and I'm sure you followed it too, if you're talking about certain topics, like hot topics, if you're talking about college versus a trades path, right? That's just a hot topic. People get really engaged and have feelings about either direction. It's a button topic. But if you go way off the reservation and you're just kind of talking something that you want to talk about, doesn't always necessarily hit. It's about looking to see what's working and what's not working. And if you want to go down that path. But one thing I want to be specific on is that if I'm creating the content and someone else is creating the content and we're like talking about the same exact thing, I might follow another person versus the other person. The reason I'm
Mm.
saying that is because it's how it's delivered. If if you're very vanilla in your message and it's just very basic and you're just kind of spewing you don't really, depending which side you're on, you could be against something, you could be for something. If you don't take a side and you're just neutral, then people just, it's just a very kind of vanilla message. But if you take a hard approach on one area, there's going to be people that say, I don't like that. And there's going to be people like, yeah, I really like that. You have to be comfortable as a content creator knowing that, maybe 40, 50% are not going to agree with you versus the other people that will. And I think those are the content creators that build authenticity and that people want to follow. But if you're just right in the middle, I don't know. I just feel it doesn't hit. So I take a stance on something and there's people who push back, and that's fine. They don't have to either follow me or agree with me, but then there's a good percentage that do. So it depends how far you want to push it as a content creator, but keep it authentic. Keep it you and your core values and what you stand for.
And that's why content like using ChatGPT for your content does not work, because ChatGPT will make you sound vanilla, will make you sound very polished and corporate, and so it's crazy because I'm sure, Andrew, if you were scrolling on LinkedIn, you'd be like, oh, that was written by ChatGPT. Like, you would know, you kind of get a flavor and a taste of what ChatGPT likes to write, which, it does have a lot of good knowledge. Obviously, I think there's a lot of utility, maybe in brainstorming. I had said in the past, like, AI is a great content assistant, but a horrible content creator, because in my opinion, I feel like it comes through that like differentiated point of view, unique point of view, maybe taking a stance, all that sort of stuff. Which, when you're asking an AI tool, that they're going to give you the most neutral kind of covering all the bases type responses, which create, in my opinion, very fluffy and content that people actually end up not consuming. But I would say the reason why people probably don't post very one-sided, hey, I'm going to take a stance, all sort of stuff, is because I honestly think people are afraid of the backlash. And so that's kind of the area I want to go into, because, for me, for example, my personality type, I'm definitely I'm an introvert, but I can be type A. Like, I'm very opinionated. I have so many opinions about things. I don't mind poking the bear, and sometimes I poke the bear too much, which isn't always good, according to my
Yep.
wife. But I say that because I know that, if I put something out there very differentiated, I'm gonna get blowback. I'm gonna get people who agree, and then I'm also gonna get people who disagree, and then also too, I'm gonna get the people who may even do ad hominem attacks where they attack you, your character, all that sort of stuff. So I'm just curious, how have you? Well, one, have you gotten backlash yourself specifically, whether it's in the comments or DMs, things like that? And then how have you navigated that yourself as a content creator? Because I know for me, at least initially when it happened to me years ago, I took it really personal. But now today, if it happens, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it's okay. They can have their own opinion. But I'm curious, what has your journey been like with backlash and trolls and all that sort of stuff? Because that stuff
Yeah.
will happen on social media.
Yeah. I mean, you're always going to have haters, right? And it's, people don't even know you and they write these things. You're like, wait a second. I look like what? And you like, look at that. And you're like, the person doesn't even know me. I don't see it a lot on LinkedIn. I'll give you a story in just a second, but I see it more on YouTube.
Hmm.
And especially if YouTube doesn't really know your audience and it's serving the wrong people your content, and they're not like the people who would really consume it. That's when you get these comments. I'm like, why would someone write that? What would possess someone to write that? And I used to feel that way, and I used to be like, why am I doing this if someone's just going to beat me up online? And they just got a thick skin. I'm like, I don't know where those people are at. I don't know. I feel bad for them that they're even doing that and taking the time to rip somebody apart who's trying to put themselves out there. I get it time to time on LinkedIn. Someone might challenge me, and that's okay. That's okay. You're not always going to agree with me. There was, I think it was about a year or so ago, there was somebody who said, "You're this, and you're trying to sell your stuff, and who are you? And you're nobody." And somebody in the comments who follows me stuck up for me and said, "How dare you speak to Andrew?" Like, somebody who really cares about the mission and passion that I'm on, and stuck up for me. So there's a lot of that. You have people in your audience who stick up for you. And I thought that was pretty cool in a sense that there was somebody there who really believes in what I'm doing and stuck up for me. But I think it's just a matter of, you're going to get that whatever you do. And the more and more you're out there, the more and more people are going to try to pick you apart. But again, I feel it's like half are with you, half are not with you. and that's your audience. But stay authentic, knowing that you're going to get pushback. You have to be comfortable with that, because not a lot of people want to see that. Just like you said, you used to take it personally, and I took it personally too. But it's just, there's a lot of people out there with all different perspectives. You got to respect that they have their perspectives on things, and they're not going to be the people who are going to be following you. And I'm okay with that.
You mentioned Alex Ramosi earlier, and he actually had a post he made recently, something about like haters, things like that. He basically said something along the lines of, if you wouldn't ask if you wouldn't ask their advice to begin with, then who cares what they say about you? And I think sometimes we give people, put them on a pedestal, even though they probably aren't doing what you do, don't understand you, you don't understand them, but they just feel the need to go out and hate and say things like that. But the reality is like, hey, if this is not somebody you actually respect or want to be like or would ask advice from, then who cares? And also, too, I think the other thing that I've had to learn myself, because it's not hard for me to clap back to, and that's not always good from a social media standpoint, is I've actually had to figure out how to like see it from their side, which is tough, honestly. I'm like, okay, I could see how you could get there, and then try to respond in a calm way. But every now and then I'll push back a little bit just because of my personality type and all that sort of stuff. So I could definitely resonate with that.
I say take, and this is just me. Sometimes you got to take the high road. They're sometimes they're looking for you to get agitated, and if it's like fueling, it's like you said, poking the bear. It's just you
Yep.
keep poking the bear. I just sometimes I'll take the high road, or just like, we just don't see eye to eye here, and that's fine.
I'm gonna here. So now that we're saying, and I'm literally pulling this up as we speak, just so I can read this to you. I'm not sure if you saw this post or not, but there's this gal by the name of Christina McMillan, and she basically made a post yesterday addressing a comment that she got, and in a nutshell, she's a fractional person, a type leader within construction, and she's not necessarily a construction person herself, but somebody ended up writing this, honestly, and she screenshotted it and shared it. And I'll just read a little bit just so you can get an idea of what was said. But she says that this person said to her is, "This is where you will fail. Stop trying to change the industry. We are decades deep and you will face resistance beyond your control. Learn how to train within the industry standards or stop demanding SHIT. You have no right, knowledge, or ability to make demands. Work with us who do this, or get the F out of this outer space. Maybe you can find warm bodies, but if you don't perform, then what what have we as an industry gained?" And so I've seen from non construction related roles, like she's like in leadership and marketing, and she does like include diversity, equity, inclusion type things as well, talks about that. I'm in marketing myself. I've got, maybe not to this extent, maybe not this pointed, but I have gotten remarks that, hey, you're just a marketing guy, you're just a LinkedIn, like you're not in the industry. I'm curious, have you ever gotten that, knowing that obviously you're the CEO of Toolfetch? It's not, you're helping the trades, you're giving them the tools and equipment for it, but have you ever gotten that sort of like feedback or resistance, and how have you dealt with that, if you have?
Not so much. I mean, someone might say, you're not directly in the trades. I'm like, okay, I'm not. I'm advocating for the trades, but I work with tradespeople. So I work side by side with plumbers and electricians, and I'm helping them get the products that they need. Um, not so much, not so much, but I could see that, and it's interesting. I When I was scrolling, I know who she is, and I didn't fully read that post, but it's hard to take that. But you got to, again, look at it and say, I don't know where that person's coming. In a sense, maybe they're in a bad place.
Yep.
Maybe they had a bad day. You never know where somebody's at, and not reacting to it, and not letting it get under your skin is just, it's just, again, it's not somebody who's going to be someone's going to agree what I'm doing, but there's a lot of other people out there who are listening to things that I am doing, and I'm making impact. So I just think it's just what it is. The bigger you get, the more at times you're going to get haters, and it's just what happens. It's just
Yep.
it's just the nature of the beast
Yeah, for sure.
with
And
content creation.
And I want to say this not to necessarily like jump on this topic and try to, cause all this drama per se, but I just want to say that this is a real concern that people have when they create content. I've talked to executives who, want to create personal brand content, but they're like, man, like it's just tough because what are my clients going to say? What are my employees get like? We're just there's just a general like fear of judgment of people saying how we say things, how we talk, communicate, how we are, all these sort of things. And I think in general, if we don't have the thick skin, especially from a content creation standpoint, because it is, I feel like for me, I'm used to it, and I'm sure you're used to it now, where it's less vulnerable. If somebody says something like, okay, yeah, like you're able to engage, like, maybe disagree respectfully, but it won't, be as detrimental as maybe what might have been years ago. But I'm curious because I've heard you say this in the past that you have a speech impediment. And I say that because you're an incredible communicator. I mean, this podcast obviously is an illustration enough that how well you communicate, but how did you overcome that from a video set? Because you mentioned you like being in front of video, but you have a speech impediment. Like, how did you make it all work?
Yeah, I had that mostly when I was younger. So I think that was always in the back of my mind. So when you go to speak and you have that,
Hmm.
it's always in your mind that it's not gonna come out right. And on top of, again, being an introvert too, it's almost like a double whammy. I think that just took time to get over it. It's still always in my mind when I'm about to speak. When I was in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, and I was on a panel, and I was speaking in front of about 100 people. And before I spoke, I'm like, that split second where it might not come out right. But I've worked on it so much that I'm able to just work around it. That was just hard work and trying to get through that. But that was mostly at a younger age. But it's been always in my mind that that could be an issue
Yeah.
when I open my mouth. So there are times where I get jumbled up with something, and mostly it's happened when I'm when I'm recording, and I could just be like delete and then
Hmm.
just redo it again. But you only get one chance when you're speaking on stage.
Yep.
So I think it's preparation, because always prep, and I always try to be prepared if I go on stage and that type of stuff. So I'm constantly working on that. But it's in the back of my head. It's there.
Yeah.
I try to push it back all the way back in my mind, but it was something that it was challenging. That it's a lifelong challenge that I've worked on really hard for myself.
Yeah, and that's encouraging to see the progress and growth. Because even for me, like I had, and I still struggle with a stutter here and there, especially when I'm talking really fast. When I talk really fast, I'm like, blah, 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 like I'll get stuck there. So sometimes I have to remind myself, Jonathan, slow down. You don't have to say a million words right now. Just
Yeah.
take it easy, and that just allows for me to communicate more relaxed, but also to just say less words and be more meaningful with the words I'm saying. So to kind of because man, like there's so many topics that we so many rabbit trails we could have gone down specifically to the mechanics of content creation, all sort of stuff. Maybe in the future we could talk more specifically about things like more specific topics that you mentioned today. But the way I want to end this conversation today specifically is around short form video. And so the first question I want to ask to that is, what are tips you would give people preparing to get in front of a camera, whether that's self-talk, whether that's the environment, like what sort of things would allow for people to be more at ease and more calm, and just tips you would give, just little simply getting in front of a camera.
Well, first is just to start, right? Uh, just start. Just push the record button and start recording. Get comfortable with yourself being on camera. Look, to this day, if I am speaking on camera and I know my kids are like someone's in the background, I get a little. I'm not fully concentrating 100%. So I try to do content when I'm alone and I'm talking to the camera. So for me, it worked where first I had just had to get comfortable with me on the camera and look and say, oh, well, I didn't look right, or my hair doesn't look right, or why do I look like this? And try to get over that whole aspect and getting comfortable with your own voice too, because
Mm,
people pick apart their own. How I sound like that? So getting comfortable just being on camera itself, pushing the record button, but first starting, getting on camera, watching yourself, and just be like, look, it's never going to be 100% perfect. It will never be 100% perfect. And when I shoot certain things, a lot of times it's maybe be 80%, and I'm okay with that, because it's being authentic and being real that I flubbed the line, and I I mess something up, or I'm like, wait, why did I say that? It's authentic. And people can pick up on that it's not so scripted where it's everything is so perfect. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
perfect because you're being you. But I think just starting, getting yourself on camera, getting comfortable with your voice, getting comfortable with how you look, and even get it. And this is hard too. Get it critiqued by someone close to you. It's hard to hear it. It really is, but you have to be self-aware of where you can make improvements. It's been hard for me, and sometimes you don't want to hear it, but that's how you get better. So it's the little things that you do, but getting open and honest feedback from others is most important. But again, going back, the most important thing is just start.
Yeah, for sure. Just starting and getting those reps in. I remember you saying like people being around. I'm very similar to. I used to be an in-house marketer for a construction company, and I would create monthly update videos. So like normally, like you would do like a newsletter and kind of updating here are anniversaries, here's some company news, updates, things like that. So normally, companies, if they do that, they do like a newsletter that way it hits people's email. But we had trades workers on the field who didn't really look at their emails at all, and so we tried to find ways to make it easy for them to digest. So I ended up creating this series of videos, updates, where I would do it myself and speak right into a camera. And I would do it both in English and Spanish because we had Spanish, trades workers as well, to make it as easy and inclusive as possible. But one of the things I noticed anytime I would record is I would always try to go find a very secluded area where there's nobody around. And sometimes I would do it outside, and then, like we worked in a business park, and then some people would be walking around, and I would be talking, and then I would just be like, I would just stop and just pretend I'm looking at my notes, just because I'm like, man, like you guys are like, I'm nervous. I'm like, because I picture what they assume I look like. I'm like, who's this goofball talking right into a camera? So so I could definitely relate to that piece, as it relates to being comfortable.
I think another piece would help me is that when I was doing content before, and it was more infomercial stuff for our business and funny videos, it was my own people. I would put it on Facebook and stuff like that, and people in my own neighborhood would stop me and say, "I saw you on Facebook." I'm like, "Oh," and what I was getting, and I'm speaking about this humbly. They said, "Wow, I really like the videos. I like how you were on videos." So I started getting comfortable because I was getting good feedback too. That
Mm,
made me more comfortable as well, and I knew I was getting better and better on camera, but I
mhm.
was getting the reassurance from people. But I was also taking feedback and still being self-aware. I'm not the best on video. I never. I don't ever say that I am. I just keep trying to get better and see how I can speak better. How can I talk about the topic better? And just every day, just if I can get just a little bit better, is a win for me.
So to further deconstruct just like the short form video, obviously you mentioned this earlier that the topic is super important as far as what you're going to be talking about. But now, when it comes to the mechanics of recording the content, do you have a script, or how do you go about knowing what you're going to say and all that sort of stuff from that perspective?
It's just bullet points.
Okay.
It's just bullet points. I'm not looking to read certain things, but it's bullet points so I stay on track. Like, I think the most important piece is to write down the hook, right?
Mm,
If you don't write down the hook, it's hard to kind of get into the realm of, then I got to go to the, am I hitting all these different topics if I don't start off with that? Because that's the most important piece. Because even if you have the best message in the world, if you don't hook somebody in that first 1 to 2 seconds, they're out. So work on that hook, and it's that initial hook to get somebody in the content, and then it's just a matter of following bullet points and things that you want to hit. To fully script it, it might work for some people, but some people feel like they're just reading what's
yeah.
on a screen. Some people can handle scripts and can kind of go off script. It really depends, but I try not to stay scripted. I just try to be authentic if I can, and if I flub it, I flub it, and it's what it is. And Like I said, if I could get 80% there, that's fine for me. If I could put the content out, but I don't want to stress. Oh, the other thing is I would not try to be a perfectionist,
Hmm.
because if you think it's going to be perfect, it's not. And you do 25 different takes and you've only done one video, that's not going to work either. So if you can get to that 75-80% mark, that's fine.
That's great. Last thing with the deconstructing this short form video, you do a really good job of this. One of them is tone, like the tone of your voice.
Yep.
Actually, before I share the second thing, because the way Andrew sounds right now is actually very different than what he sounds like in the short form video.
Yep.
So that's the first thing. But then body language too. You use a lot of expression, things
Hmm.
like that. So I'm just curious, what advice do you have with those two things?
That just, for me, I'm not even thinking. I'm just naturally doing it. Like I'm just naturally just using my hands, or my voice goes up. I don't know. It's just, I can't even, I'm just doing it in the moment. And sometimes I'll do a retake and just redo a certain portion of the video because I'm overemphasizing something. And what
Mhm.
you're saying right now, my energy is probably very different than it is on video, because it's a podcast.
Yeah.
So
Can you give us a
uh,
taste? Can you give us a taste of what Andrew sounds like when it just give me like a 2 line thing, just for those that don't know, like, or what your voice sounds like.
the skilled trades is a dying career.
There you go. Yep, I recognize that voice every morning.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like in wrestling, if you see Hulk Hogan is very different when he's in front of the camera in the ring versus
Mm,
you put him on video. So, um, but it depends on energy levels and where I'm at too. Because
yeah,
sometimes I'll just do a video and it's just I'm just talking, just like there's no highs and lows in my voice, and I'm not kind of using my hands. I think that energizes me when I'm moving around. I'm using my hands. It's funny when I used to use my hands a lot in my YouTube videos, and people are like, "Who is this guy? His hands are going everywhere." People were critiquing my hands, like where I put my hands. I couldn't win. So I was like, whatever. I was like, this is who I am, and this is how I shoot video, and if they want to critique it, that's perfectly fine. But I'm not like this, and
yeah.
I try not to stand like this. And in this case, in a podcast, I'm a little bit different, but um, I enjoy it.
Yep.
I enjoy doing those in videos.
Yeah, for sure. So a quick recap of what it is. So this is Andrew Brown's short form video strategy. One is finding a really good topic, a viral, potentially viral or hot topic, all that sort of stuff to be able to talk about. Second is when it comes to formulating your script, it really has to do with bullet points. That way you're able to communicate in a more organic way, but make sure you have a strong hook. Then as you communicate, make sure that you're mindful of tone because you want the energy to stay high so people are engaged throughout the video. And if you're naturally a very expressive person with your hands, go ahead and do that. And then the last thing is I've noticed is you have a good sign off. You'll say, "All right, let's do this," or things like that. I think that actually like that kind of tying it at the end is incredibly important. But the last thing though is the actual editing piece. Is you use captions, you use a lot of illustrations, things like that. Obviously, you have the social media caption, all that sort of stuff, and it's crazy that this formula and this strategy that you've taken works really well. And I feel like I'm starting to see more people maybe use aspects of this. But in a nutshell, if you want to create content like Andrew Brown, there is the full framework. Obviously, you have to be, in a sense, Andrew Brown himself to do this kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean you can't create content, inspired, by his structure. So I say all this because I want to end this conversation now because I know that we're a little over time and I appreciate you coming on the pod. But before we end this conversation, obviously, I want to encourage people to go follow you on LinkedIn if they want to see an actual day by day just experience of what the type of content that you're doing, all that sort of stuff, and maybe even try to understand the mechanics of it for yourself. But I just want to leave this open for you, Andrew. Is there any final thoughts or any last things that you want to leave? And even too, if you want to plug some other things, that's totally cool. But just anything that you want to leave with the audience today.
Yeah, I'll certainly go into where you could find me, but just if you're thinking about content, you're listening to this, you got to just start, because you just keep pushing it off and pushing it off and do next week, and you just don't do it. Just start getting comfortable in front of the camera, start getting comfortable with your voice. Listen, it's not easy for someone to see you on camera and to get critiqued, but that's the most important way to get better. So first is to just start, and making sure that you have a content strategy, making sure that what's the objective of your content strategy? What are you trying to do? And who are you trying to go after? What's your target? And depending on what platform, and obviously LinkedIn is a little bit different if you're on TikTok or YouTube, figuring out who the audience is and making sure that the videos that you are making are good for the algorithms. Because if you're making a LinkedIn video might not work well on TikTok, which might not work well on YouTube. So making sure that it's done right for the platform itself. So, but just start hitting the record button. If you want to find me, every day I'm on LinkedIn. I try to post a video mostly every single day. That's where I put the bulk of my content. That's my hub. YouTube is actually under Tool Fetch, our business name. I'm also under TikTok under my name, Andrew Brown, as well. So you could check me out there. If you're interested in the trades, you can certainly check out the Skilled Trades Advisory Council. That is our foundation, and we're working to solve the skilled trade shortage. So that is the best way to find me.
Awesome. And really quick, what's the podcast you recently launched to? I saw that on your YouTube.
Yep. I have a podcast too that has been in the works for a while. It's called The Lost Art of the Skilled Trades. That is on all the major platforms out there. And also going to be doing a lot more live events on LinkedIn and on YouTube and that type of stuff, and a lot of speaking arrangements that doing that as well.
Love it. Well, thanks so much, Andrew, for coming on the pod. Hopefully this isn't the last conversation, because I definitely have so many more things. Well, one, it's just cool to meet another person who I feel like I can geek about a lot of these intricacies of content creation, things like that. But thanks so much for coming on the podcast, obviously sharing how all kind of the foundational story as far as why you're at where you're at, and kind of this next phase in your life with content creation and advocacy for the trades, things like that, outside that are obviously far bigger than Tool Fetch and things like that. Not saying that the impact isn't great there, but this obviously is this is influencing society and things like that from a high level standpoint. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing and being an open book, because I know that some people are like, I don't want to share my insider trade secrets or things like that. And so I just appreciate you being super transparent about your process, things like that, and for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.